When I was just a little girl, someone ruined my life, and to this day, I've never forgotten it. Never in a million years did I think I'd bump into them as an adult and have the opportunity to get revenge. But that's exactly what I did. Before I dive into my story, allow me to introduce myself a bit. I'm Ellie, and I'm 25 years old. I live in San Fran, and even though I've had a pretty tough life, I'm pretty happy now, and I have the greatest job. I'm a project manager at a cool startup in Silicon Valley. I work hard, not just because I enjoy my job, but because I like being an independent kind of girl. A lot of my friends ask me why I don't just find a rich guy to take care of me, and that just drives me crazy. I mean, I chose to be single because I really don't trust guys. You see, my dad is a nasty piece of work, and so he left a pretty bad taste in my mouth when it came to how I felt about men. When I was just 5 years old, he abandoned me and my mom in LA to go live with his mistress. Even talking about it now, I feel angry. We were devastated and begged him to stay, but he left us. After that, things were horrible for me and my mom. My dad was the breadwinner and was the CEO of a company, so we'd never had to worry about a thing. But after he left, my mom struggled to find a job, and sometimes we even went to bed hungry. I remember people felt sorry for us, and one of our neighbors started leaving food parcels on our doorstep. It was very sweet of them, but humiliating too. I hated my dad for leaving us in that mess, and I hated his mistress even more for stealing him away. I vowed to never date anyone because I never wanted to end up in my mom's position. All I knew was that men hurt women, and that wasn't going to be my story. So anytime guys asked me out, I turned them down. That was until something crazy happened that changed my mind on this whole guy thing. I was feeling really ill one day, and because I lived alone, I had to go out to the grocery store to get some food. When I got back, I felt like I was about to pass out. Before I even made it inside the door, I fainted on my porch. Luckily for me, one of my neighbors saw me fainting and rushed over to help me. I'd only ever seen him a few times in passing, but when I opened my eyes, he was standing over me. I felt so grateful. He told me his name was Brian, and I couldn't believe how kind he was being. He looked after me until I'd fully recovered. He made me soup and even sat by my bed and wiped my face with a cold cloth to help get rid of my fever. The more time he spent by my side, the more I started to think maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe not all men were bad news like my dad. Maybe Brian was one of the good ones. I'm not proud of this, but I might have pretended to still be sick, just so he would keep coming to see me. Even after a week, he laughed and said to me, "Ellie, your fever is totally gone. Are you just using me now?" I could feel my face go bright red and jokingly said, "Look at me, I definitely still got a fever." I really didn't want Brian to stop visiting. Other than my mom, no one had ever been so loving towards me. There was no hiding fact that I had feelings for him. We started hanging out more. Some days I worked super late, and whenever I came home, he'd invite me over for dinner. And one night, he had set up candles and romantic music, and guys, that's when we kissed for the first time. It felt so good, and I knew there was no point fooling myself. I loved him, and he loved me too. For the next few months, we were inseparable. We spent every possible moment together, and after 6 months of dating, he asked me to meet him for lunch one day down by the waterfront. When I arrived, I couldn't believe it. He'd arranged for us to go out on a boat for a picnic. Then, when we were out in the water, looking back at the city, he turned to me and said, "Ellie, I've never met anyone like you before. I want to spend the rest of my life looking after you, my Ellie bear. Will you marry me?" Oh my god, I'm not joking. I started crying so much, I thought we were going to capsize. This was the most romantic proposal ever. Of course I said yes. I couldn't wait to spend my life with Brian, and I was already so excited to start planning our wedding. I'd always dreamt of getting married in a vineyard near Sacramento. So now all we had to do was choose a venue and of course tell our parents. Brian had met my mom and they got on so well, but I still hadn't met his parents. They were divorced and Brian only really saw his dad. His mom was always working, he said, and so they didn't hang out much. I told him it was important to me that I met them both. So he arranged it. I was pretty nervous, but Brian's dad was so lovely, just like him. I could see where he got his kindness from. Then it was time to meet his mom. We went to a restaurant that she chose, and when we walked in, I thought I was going to collapse. This couldn't be happening, I thought. Brian's mom was none other than Sasha, my dad's mistress from all those years ago. I felt sick, and Brian could sense something was wrong. I tried to act as normal as possible, but inside, I wanted to scream. Brian introduced us and told me his mom was the CEO of my company's rival company. Could this get any worse? I had to smile and pretend to be happy to meet her. Honestly, I felt like I was going to puke and was counting the minutes until I could run out of there. Finally, his mom said she had to get back to work, and I felt like I could breathe again. But I had questions. On the way home, I asked Brian about his mom's life, and he said she divorced his dad 20 years ago when he was just 7 years old. She'd moved in with another guy, which I knew was my dad, but they'd broken up a long time ago, he said, and she had been constantly changing boyfriends till now. I turned to Brian and I said, "Are you okay with that? If she was my mom, I wouldn't want her to be playing around like that." But Brian just said, "I don't care. All that matters is that she's a good mom. As for her private life, she can do whatever she likes, right?" I couldn't believe it. How could Brian be such a good son? His mom had abandoned him, and he was just fine with it. I would never forgive my dad and his mistress for destroying me and my mom's life. And now I decided it was time for revenge. She'd made my childhood a living hell, and now it was her turn to know what it felt like. With planning the wedding, we started to see his mom, Sasha, more often, and I used these opportunities to try and get closer to her. Then one day I started complaining about my job, even though I loved it, and Sasha said, "Why don't you come work for me? There's a vacancy going, and you'd be perfect for it. I mean, you have so much experience." This was exactly what I wanted. Now I could ruin her company and then watch her life crumble. Everyone was surprised I was quitting my job to work for our rival company, but I didn't even have time to care about what they thought. On the first day at my new job, Sasha introduced me to everyone in the software design department, and that's when I met Clark, the head of the department. He was a little older than me, around 30, and he was well known in Silicon Valley for being super smart. The department was about to launch a new app that would blow people's minds, and everyone was super excited about it. Throughout my first day there, I couldn't help but notice how much attention Sasha was paying to Clark. It was kind of sickening to watch. She constantly flirted with him, and all I could think was how he was way too young for her. At lunch, she acted like a schoolgirl, saying, "Clarky, I saved a seat for you." I couldn't understand why Clark would like her. She continued to flirt with him over the next few weeks. She always brought him a coffee, and she didn't do that for anyone else. Then in meetings, she always chose his ideas. It was pretty frustrating, and I even thought about telling Brian that it looked like his mom had found a new boy toy. But then one day, I was working late, and when I walked past the meeting room to go to the restroom, I heard Sasha and Clark chatting, and I couldn't stop myself from eavesdropping. Sasha was giggling and said, "Oh, come on, Clark. I'll even give you a pay rise again. It's just one date." Then Clark said, "Sorry, I really can't. I'm too busy, and to be honest, I didn't have that kind of feeling for you. I'm so sorry." Ha! It made me so pleased to hear Clark rejecting her. She didn't deserve a nice guy like Clark. As I walked back to my desk, I glanced into the meeting room, and I saw how upset she looked. Wow, she looked really hurt. She must have liked Clark a lot. And so, that's when my plan started to unfold. I would do to her what she'd done to my mom. I would steal the guy she loved right from under her nose.
Hey, it's Jessica. From the outside, my life seemed perfect. My family is wealthy, I'm beautiful, shining bright, and even my job is fancy. But from the inside, I do have a character flaw. It's my short temper that almost caused me to lose everything. I've always been Daddy's little princess, which means that anything I want, I have to get, such as new clothes, a new car, and exotic vacations. Because of this, other girls have always been jealous of me. But Kath was different. She realized there's so much more to me than my designer outfits and glossy hair. Kathy's family lived nearby. You see, my dad was friends with Kath's father, who passed away when she was little. But being the nice guy my dad is, he continued to support them. He paid for Kath's education, so we went to the same school. She was the only friend who could handle my short temper. I know, that wasn't nice, but it was hard dealing with the average girl's jealousy toward me. As a result, there were a few incidents. One time, when I was just a primary student, some girl dared to put on my shirt after sports. She said it was an accident, but as if. I yelled at her that she'd stretched it, and now she owed me a new one. Kath tried to defuse the situation, but she just got caught up in the middle of the shouting match. Literally, as me and this girl were screaming insults at each other across Kath. Then another time, some kids sat in my seat in the canteen, and when I asked them to move, they refused to. I was fuming, so I poured my custard all over them. Seeing as the kids were about to get crazy, Kath passed them a napkin, hurriedly apologized to them, then led me out of there before I covered them in more of my lunch. She understood how mad I got on things, but never got annoyed at me about it. This is why our friendship continued into adulthood. It was perfect to have a friend like Kath to grow up with, but what made my life even more perfect was the arrival of our boy next door. Yes! A new family had just moved in, and my mom told me that a cute boy my age was going around meeting people. I ran out to suss it out and find Kath standing on her front porch and talking to a super cute guy. I swished out my hair and tottered over to them. "Hi, Kath." I smiled at her. Then I turned to him and said, "Hi there. We definitely haven't met before, 'cause there's no way I'd forget you." He smiled back and introduced himself as Andrew and said he lived on that block. I sat down on the couch in Kath's house and did my research on Andrew and found out he was a pretty famous influencer. His dad ran off with another woman and started a new family, so Andrew lives with his mom and Nan. And best of all, he was single. I pulled on Kath's arm and insisted that she help me beg Andrew as my man. She looked a little awkward at first, but then she reluctantly agreed to help. I persuaded Kath to pretend that she lost her phone, then I went round to Andrew's and begged him to come and help us look for it. He spent the whole afternoon trying to help us look for it, only to hear it buzzing in my pocket. Oops. Then one time, well, this wasn't planned, but I managed to get one of my new heels stuck in a drain cover. I was standing there yelling at it when Andrew walked past and told me to take my shoe off. I refused. Did he have any idea how expensive they were? He just laughed and told me to lean on him while he carefully unwedged my shoe. Whose heart wouldn't melt for this gentle guy? After that, we started to talk more, and then chatted every day. He had a sense of humor and was very gentle toward me. It is so wonderful to know that he was impressed by how cute I was, hiding Kat's phone in my pocket to find a chance to make friends. How embarrassing, but seemed like he liked that. After 2 months, he asked me out on a date, and soon we became an official couple. I loved being around his family, as his mom and grandma were so sweet and friendly. Then my dad said he needed me to go on a 3-month business trip in San Diego. I didn't want to leave Andrew for so long, but there was nothing I could do about it. Ugh, being an adult sucked sometimes. I just had to pack up and take a flight to San Diego, then finish the job as quickly as possible. Little did I know how terrible things could happen in the next 3 months. One night, my mom called me up. She was furious, and at first, I couldn't work out what she was saying. Finally, she calmed down enough for me to make her words out. "Jess, I found the DNA test hidden away in one of your father's filing cabinets. Kath is his biological daughter. This whole time, he's been lying to us. I cannot put up with this. I'm divorcing him, and I won't be happy until he's left with nothing." What? Kath was my sister? No, it couldn't be. I called up Kath to get to the bottom of this. As soon as she picked up, I screamed at her. "Your dad's my dad. How could you keep this a secret? You're trash, and so's your mom. You're both vile, ugly gold diggers, and I hate you both." Kath spluttered out. What? Huh? I don't understand." "You heard me. You're trash, and so's your mom. She's nothing more than a man-eating, money-obsessed liar, and I hate her." Sobbing, Kath replied, "Don't talk about my mom like that." This only made me angrier, so I yelled, "I will say what I want to. I hate you and I hate her. I hope you both fall down a pothole and never get out." Suddenly, I heard a voice say in the background, "Who are you talking to? And why are you so upset?" I knew that voice. It was Andrew's. Why was he with Kath? I was about to scream out at her to stay away from my man, but she hung up. I immediately tried calling Andrew, but he didn't answer. I was so angry I screamed out, then went into the kitchen and started smashing glasses onto the floor and swiping things out of the cupboards. The next day, Andrew called me. I thought he was going to try and worm his way out of what he did, so I answered with a, "Oh, hi Andrew. It's nice to finally hear from you." He replied, "Hi Jess. Look, I have something important to tell you. It's my grandma. She's in the hospital, and I can't afford the medical bills. I hate asking, but please, could I borrow some money?" Furious, I yelled, "Who do you think you are? You did the dirty behind my back, and now you have the cheek to ask for my help? It's none of my business, dude." He fell silent, then hung up. At first, I was fuming. How dare he do that to me? But once I had time to calm down, I thought maybe I had overreacted a tiny bit. I mean, I could have given him a chance to explain, so I tried calling him again, but he didn't answer. I called Kath, and in my calmest voice, I asked her to tell me what was going on. She said she had no idea that my dad was also her real dad, and it was a lot for her to process. Then she said that she was only around at Andrew's last night because his grandma had a fever, and she was trying to help. But then her fever worsened, so she was taken to the hospital. I felt pretty bad about it all, so I tried calling Andrew again to sort all this mess out, but he'd blocked my number. I transferred him some money over towards his grandma's expenses, but he sent it straight back to me. It was so hard being so far away from Andrew and not being able to go and talk things through with him. I missed him like crazy. Because of this, I confided in Kath loads, and she kept me in the loop about how Andrew's grandma was. Apparently, she wasn't well at all. Then, one day, she came up with an idea to help. She told me to send money to her account, and she'd give it to Andrew, and tell him it was from her. Then, when his grandma was better, she'd tell Andrew the truth about where the money came from, and he was sure to realize how much I cared for him and forgive me. I thought this was a great idea, so I sent Kath the money. Then things got weird. She went super quiet and then stopped talking to me altogether. Then 2 months later, through social media, I found out that Andrew was getting married to Kath. What? After having a screaming frenzy, I calmed down enough to book a flight home. I took an Uber to Andrew's house and pounded on his door. He answered, and on seeing me, he slammed the door in my face. I wasn't leaving until he spoke to me, so I sat on his doorstep. It was only when it started to rain that he eventually opened the door, and in a gruff tone said, "Okay, you have 2 minutes. Then I want you off my property for good." Look, I know you're mad, and I'm sorry, but why are you ignoring me? I tried to make amends for what I did. I sent you the money. I know. I sent it straight back, remember? He grunted. Not that money. The money that Kath gave to you and said was from me. What? That money was from her, not you. You're jealous. You found out I was marrying her, and you're here to ruin our lives. No, I'm not. Please, it was me. I wanted to help. I pleaded, but he tutted, then slammed the door again. I stood there, a soggy mess, and his words sunk in. Kath had lied to Andrew about the money. Why would she do that? Furious, I stormed around to her house and was about to press the buzzer down until she answered when the door opened, and I saw Kath stepping out with Andrew's mom. I jumped out of sight and listened. Andrew's mom was thanking her for all her help and saying how much she couldn't wait for her to be her daughter-in-law. What? As soon as his mom walked off, I jumped out of hiding and confronted Kath. You're a liar! Kath was surprised seeing me, but then she just shrugged and said, whatever, then walked toward her door. He's my man now, not yours, she added, looking back at me. You traitor! I screamed at her as I charged towards her. We got into a fight, and there was a lot of hair pulling. Finally, Kath managed to get through her entrance door and lock me out. She grinned at me through the window, so I shouted at her. Kath, you just wait! You won't get away with this! A few days passed, and their wedding day arrived. It was in some super swanky golf resort. I tried sneaking in through the entrance, but 2 guards stopped me. Ugh! Kath must have pre-warned them about me. So I had to find another way in, which involved climbing through a tiny gap in the hedge. A bodycon dress wasn't my best choice, and I had twigs in my hair and grass stains all over me. Still, out of breath, I showed up at the aisle and waved the evidence of bank statements and messages between me and Kath in Andrew's face, and shouted, Look! This is all the proof you need to show that I sent the money to Kath to help your grandma, and she's a filthy liar! Andrew looked shocked, but he took the evidence from me. No, she's making it up! Kath's eyes widened in alarm as she tried to grab the evidence out of Andrew's hands. Seeing her reaction, he pulled it away from her and looked through it, his face falling when he discovered the truth. How could you lie to me about this? He stared at her. You told me that Jess cut all contact with you. Teary-eyed, Kath glared at me and said, You get everything! The nice clothes and the lavish lifestyle, yet you act like a spoiled brat. I was sick of hiding in your shadow and defending you for all your childish outbursts. I liked Andrew from the beginning, but no, you had to have him. Through gritted teeth, Andrew told her, It's over, Kath. I never want to see you ever again. After that, she rushed up the aisle in a frenzy of white fabric and sobs. Geez, talk about making an exit. That was 3 months ago, and a lot has changed since then. My dad eventually managed to persuade Mum to forgive him, although he had to buy her a new car and take her on a month-long island getaway. Also, she insisted that she never wanted to see Kath or her mom ever again, so Dad arranged for them to move to another city. This worked for me, as I never wanted to see Kath again either. I know I have a short temper, and I overreact sometimes, but I honestly believed that Kath was my friend. It hurt knowing that she didn't care about me at all. She just wanted my life. As for Andrew and me, now we're back together. And there's no way I'm letting my short temper cause me to lose him again. All of this could have been avoided if I hadn't let my anger blindside me. I should have trusted him from the start and heard him out. So now, if I feel anger overtaking my thoughts, I will go and pace the yard first to calm down. I may look like a crazy person, but it works a treat.
Do you believe in fate? Well, I never did. I'm a 21-year-old college student studying finance and banking. So, yeah, numbers are my forte. Therefore, I'm a logical thinker. Horoscopes and chance meetings? As if. But then I met someone who changed it all. I'm Kai, by the way, and let me tell you my story. It all started one evening while studying. I got a serious craving for some Cheetos, so I went out to get some. That's when I saw a petite girl shouting at 2 huge guys in the park. Hey, Bigfoot, did you really just litter? Pick it up now or I'll give you a good going over. Oh man, did this girl have a death wish? And was she drunk? The 2 guys didn't look happy. They approached her and one of them even raised his hand up like he was gonna hit her. But she quickly pushed his hand away, which only made him madder. Man, I didn't want to get involved in this. So I pretended I hadn't seen them and walked off. But then I was just a few steps away, I heard one of the guys scream. And the other guy said, "What the? Gross!" I could have just carried on walking, but nope, my curiosity got the better of me. So I turned around and saw that one guy was covered in vomit. Then the girl pointed at me and said, "Honey, there you are." Then she fainted. Huh? I didn't know her. I was staring at them, looking perplexed, when one of the dudes yelled, "Why are you still standing there? Quickly take your crazy girlfriend home if you don't want to taste my fist." I was so scared I hurried over and carried this girl off. I had no idea who she was or where she lived. This was crazy. I placed her down on a nearby bench and looked around for those guys, but luckily they'd gone. I didn't know what to do, so I left her there and walked off. But then I started to feel bad. Was I too heartless? What if something else happened to her? So I went back and gave the girl a piggyback ride back to my house. Jeez, she was so much heavier than she looked. As soon as I dropped her onto the couch, her phone rang, so I answered it. Hello? Then the person on the other end of the line asked, Who are you? Where's my friend? I muttered out my address and was about to tell her to come pick up her friend, but she already hung up. Why was she so rude? I'd almost bust my back carrying her friend to safety. How annoying. This night has been far too dramatic for me, and worse still, I didn't have any Cheetos. I decided to take a shower, then get some sleep. But as soon as I stepped out of the bathroom, the doorbell rang. I presumed it must be the girl's friend, so I answered the door. Then 2 cops immediately pushed me against the wall and handcuffed me. Before I could fathom what was happening, one of them said kidnap and assault accusations had been made against me, and I was escorted to the station. What? I tried to explain what happened, but they wouldn't listen to me. That night, as I sat in the cold, uninviting cell, I found myself regretting my kindness. I didn't sleep a wink. I just hoped the next morning came quickly so that I could confront that girl about this false accusation. But before I could do that, the cops released me at dawn. The girl had sobered up and told them it was all just a misunderstanding. Well, luckily, she still remembered a bit, or else I didn't dare to imagine it anymore. I swore I would never get involved with anyone in need ever again. No good deed goes unpunished, for real. A few days later, when I was watching TV, someone knocked on my door, and you wouldn't believe it. It's the drunk girl. I looked at her suspiciously. What are you doing here? The girl didn't say anything. Instead, she coldly slipped past me and entered my house. Huh? What was she playing at? Then she glared at me and asked me about that night. After I told her everything that happened, she laughed. Okay, I believe you. If I didn't, you'd know about it. She held her fist in front of me. I startled and almost fell off my chair. Then she chuckled. Now I'm hungry. Go make your guests some food. What was with this girl? She was so direct and bold. I glanced at her and said no, but she continued. If you don't, I'll go to the cops and change my statement. Then she got up to leave, so I quickly said, okay, fine. Then reluctantly searched my cupboards for food. Trusted spaghetti, how you never fail me. So I prepared bolognese for us. While she was eating, she said, I'm Nora, by the way, the best screenplay writer major in the country. She winked. She thanked me for the food, then left. Phew, that'd be it now, surely. Nope, turns out this was just the beginning. The next morning, she texted me, come pick me up for college ASAP, else I'm calling the cops. Was she being serious? Then she sent me another message with her address and told me to hurry up. I rushed over there and she got into my car, glared at me, and said, You're late. And that's how I somehow became this Nora girl's servant. Her calls and messages could come at any time. And she would always force me to do things for her straight away. One time I was soaking in the bath when she texted and demanded I bring her some chocolate. Another time she called me at 2 a.m. and told me she was bored, so I had to come over and play some video games with her. I also became her unpaid Uber driver. Every day, from home to school and back. And it's inevitable that I overslept once, so Nora bombarded my phone with tons of texts and calls. I groggily answered, and she used her calling the cops threat again to force me to get there in 15 minutes. What a pain in the neck. Another time, I just stepped out of the house to go and hang out with my friends when Nora showed up and insisted that I had to take her to the cinema. She wouldn't take no for an answer, so I had to cancel on my friends and go watch some bland movie with her. Such a troublesome girl, right? But strangely, as time went by, I started to find Nora less annoying, and instead found myself smiling when she texted me or called. On the days when she didn't bother me, well, my mood seemed to dampen. Was I crazy? I mean, she was cute, very spontaneous, and, well, there was no one else quite like her. But then all of a sudden the messages and calls stopped. Did she not want me around anymore? I miss Nora. Many times I had to stop myself from calling her. I should be happy I was out of Nora's control, right? Then one day out of the blue, my phone beeped. It was Nora. Come to the Starbucks on Vincent Street. Move it. You have 5 minutes. Geez, that bossy tone again. Still, I immediately drove to the address. When I got there, I saw Nora with a guy and a girl. I walked over to them and just sat down. Nora held my arm. Honey, why are you so late? I stared at her in surprise. She smiled and turned to the other two. This is Kai, my boyfriend. What? Did I get it wrong? Did she just say I was her boyfriend? Then she said, Kai, this is my former bestie Kim and her boyfriend Greg, who's also my ex. Awkward, right? but I have you now so we can all be friends. Reading the situation, I realized I had to go along with it. So I stroked her hair and said, "Yes, my honey muffin, anything you want." My cheesy lines seemed to work, as they both looked annoyed, then left. So I turned to look at Nora and stammered, "Did you just say I'm your boyfriend?" Nora said nonchalantly, "Yeah, isn't that okay? If you don't like it, forget it." Then she was about to leave. I pulled her hand and said, "Yes, of course. Sounds great." So that's how we became an official couple. We went on a few dates, and she was her usual demanding self. Not that I'd want her any other way. Then one time, after a month of dating, Nora dragged me to a swan lake in a nearby park. She looked at me for a long time and then said, "Kai, I'm studying abroad for a year. I leave tomorrow." I glared at her in surprise and asked why she hadn't told me sooner. She continued, "I guess I didn't want to make you sad, and I don't know if your feelings are big enough, so write down your feelings for me and give them to me tomorrow." That night, I carefully wrote down all my thoughts and feelings for her. I still had hope that this 1 year of long-distance love would be over quickly. The next day, I drove her to the airport and handed her my letter. To my surprise, Nora also gave me a letter and told me over and over that I could only read it when I got home. Of course, I obeyed her. Then read it as soon as I passed my door, and whoa, I wasn't expecting this. In it, Nora confessed all this time she was just using me to get revenge on her ex, and took advantage of me to get over him. That night we had first met, she found out about him and Kim, but now she regretted how she treated me. At the end of the letter, she wrote, "If fate wants us to be together, then we'll meet again one day." What? I was so shocked, so I called to tell her she didn't need to feel guilty and that I forgave her. I kept calling, but it didn't work. I also asked her friends, but no one knew how to reach her. She disappeared from all social media, and just like that, she vanished from my life. I missed Nora so much and found myself hoping that fate would reunite me with her someday. Then one time while I was surfing YouTube, this web drama called My Destiny Is Yours caught my eyes. Curious, I decided to check it out. And I watched wide-eyed as my story with Nora played out in front of me through each episode. This definitely was written by Nora. But how would she end it? It stopped at the part where the girl left and cut off all contact with the guy. An announcement popped up on the screen. The finale was launching at 9 p.m. tonight. I anxiously watched the seconds tick by. During the last episode, the two characters met up at a swan lake. I had a hunch, so without a second delay, I immediately ran to the swan lake in the nearby park. My heart flipped when I saw a girl standing there. It was Nora. Man, I ran so fast and hugged her. She hugged me back, then said, "I was a little nervous you wouldn't see the movie." Then she smirked. "But it doesn't matter anyway. I could have just texted you, come to the Swan Lake now, and you would have come, right?" Then we both burst out laughing and continued to hug each other. Well, you see, fate brought me and Nora together, and this logic-loving skeptic is now a big believer in destiny. How about you? Have you found your destiny yet?
Yes! Headshot! Go cry to your mama! You're probably wondering who this gaming pro is. Well, that's me. Yes, it's 3 a.m., and I've been playing for 9 hours straight, but time sure does fly when I'm gaming. I'm Cooper, by the way, and I live with my wife Amelia and our baby girl Ara. I wanted to call her Zelda, but my wife said no way. I love gaming, and always thought it would be there to save me, but instead, it almost cost me everything I love. It started back when I was a little kid. My parents argued a lot, so I used to make a fort in my room, switch on my Nintendo DS, and escape into a virtual world. This love of games continued as I grew up. I didn't socialize or anything. Instead, I rushed home from school and went straight on my Xbox, PlayStation, or PC. I didn't have any real friends. Nope. The only kids I spoke to were ones I gamed with. Then I graduated from college and ended up with a job as a system engineer for a big tech company. Geez, it was exhausting. By the time I got home, I was so tired I could barely keep my eyes open, let alone game. So, I put my gaming equipment in the basement. But then everything changed when I bumped into Amelia in a local coffee house. Whoa. She was the most beautiful girl I've ever seen. I guess she must have seen something she liked in this goofball, as after dating 6 months, we got married. I know. Crazy, huh? Soon after, she fell pregnant. I was excited but also terrified. How did that happen? I mean, I know how it actually happened, but whoa. Me? A dad? Then, when Ara was born, my life turned completely upside down. You see, Babies cause a lot of stress. Did you know that the quickest way to get a child's attention is to sit down and look comfortable? Because every time I did that, she started to cry. Work sucked, and then my home life sucked too. There was no escape. I felt like I was going to explode. So I went down to the basement and set my PC up. I started playing World of Warcraft. It felt incredible to be a druid again. The thought of gaming kept me going at work. Then when I got home, I barely acknowledged my wife and daughter and rushed down to the basement to play games. Amelia wasn't happy about it. She often appeared with a crying aura and told me to take her. But I just grunted out "I'm busy," then carried on with my game. Hey, she was the one at home all day while I worked my butt off. All she needed to do was take care of the baby and keep the house clean. Easy. I told her this, and she got mad and made me sleep on the couch. Great. No, I mean really great. I could play video games all night long. Awesome. But it turns out it's much easier to game all night when you're in high school and can catch some Z's at the back of the class. But not so easy when you have a taxing job. I was on level 100 of exhaustion, so it wasn't surprising that I ended up messing up at work and got fired. Amelia was furious and demanded I apply for other jobs. Nah, I didn't want to. I mean, hello? No more early mornings, no more deadlines, no more cranky boss. It was just me and my beloved games. On one occasion, I was heading toward a record high score when suddenly Amelia appeared and blocked the screen. Babe, you need to move. I jabbed at the game console as I desperately tried to peer around her. No, she shouted at me. What's happened to you, Cooper? You look like Gandalf, only the homeless version. You hadn't taken a bath and shaved for weeks. You're killing me here. Now I'm dead. Thanks a lot. I slammed my fist onto the table. That's it. Get out. She yanked on my arm. I can't take this anymore. Get out. She actually kicked me out of my own home. That crazy woman. I didn't have any friends, so I ended up at my parents' house. This was so humiliating. I told them that it was just Amelia being hormonal, but they said she told them all about my gaming obsession, and it had to stop. They'd signed me up to be some guinea pig for an experimental treatment program in Hawaii. Hey, maybe a beach vacation didn't sound so bad, right? But nope. The island was literally in the middle of nowhere. Where was the hotel? All I saw were tiny huts with grass roofs. What? They couldn't expect me to stay here. This instructor guy called Cole gathered the group on the beach and gave us a rundown of the rules. We'd be camping here for the whole month, without any digital devices. We also had to follow a strict diet and exercise plan. Are you kidding me? I felt like I'd been sucked into a survival game and the escape button was busted. Everybody else started building their tents side by side. Socializing wasn't really my thing, so I built my tent away from them by the sea. It was hungry work, and my stomach was rumbling. So I asked Cole when dinner was ready. He told me it was my job to make a fire. Then he passed me a note with instructions. 1. Gather dry wood. 2. Create a fire structure. 3. Light the fire by using the hand drill method. Okay, sounded easy. Dang it! I've been spinning this for about 20 minutes now. Where's the damn fire? I was about to give up when I suddenly saw something glowing. Oh my god, it worked! But then I felt a sneeze and couldn't hold it. Oh no, there goes the ember. In the end, this one guy pushed me out of the way and lit the fire in a few minutes. What a show-off. I was licking my lips in excitement when I saw Cole bringing out some food, but disappointedly, he passed me a plate of veg. What? I shouted out, "Where's the freaking chicken?" Cole pointed at the white thing on my plate. It's chicken breast. No, that's not chicken. Where are the wings and the breadcrumbs? He rolled his eyes. It's called clean eating. Get used to it. This place was a nightmare, but a good night's sleep would make me feel better, right? Wrong, as the ground was as hard as rocks. Finally, I fell asleep, only to wake up with soggy feet. Oh no, my tent was flooded. No wonder nobody else chose to camp next to the ocean. Island routine was awful. It was full of dumb group activities such as meditation, beach soccer, and hiking. One day we even had to build a raft. As usual, I tried my best to avoid working and socializing, but there's no way they'd leave me alone, so I reluctantly participated. After it was done, we tried it out, but it soon capsized, and I was the only one that couldn't swim. Everyone immediately rushed over and saved me. I was so touched and felt ashamed that I've been so self-centered. So after that, I actually tried to put myself out there and be more sociable. And not gonna lie, it was not too bad. Then our evenings were spent sitting around the campfire and listening to everyone drone on about their problems. My turn was easy for me because I had no problems. The problem was my wife, not me. She didn't understand that I had a lot of pressure at work and home, so playing video games was my only escape. Everyone tutted and glared at me. Then a guy named Brad said, "That's not cool, bro. To be honest, I was the same way. I was addicted to watching sports and refused to help my wife out. So we switched places, and I learned how hard caring for the kids and looking after the house is. I knew I needed to change before I lost my family forever, so that's why I joined the program." Poor guy, but this wasn't the same for me, was it? I don't know, maybe I had been a little unfair on Amelia. I was thinking about this as I walked back to my tent when this girl named Brittany caught up with me. She put her hand on my shoulder and flicked out her hair. Was she, flirting? I waved my wedding ring finger in front of her, but she just shrugged and said, "I don't see your wife here. Come to me when you change your mind." Then she walked away. Geez, this girl was crazy. Kinda hot, but still crazy. The next day, I unzipped my tent, ready for another day in this nightmare. But what was this? Huh? It was kinda beautiful here. It was like I was seeing it for the first time. The sparkling sand, swaying palm trees, lush tropical plants, and endless sunshine. Amelia and Aura would love it here too. I hoped they'd both forgive me. I really did miss them. By the end of the month, I didn't want to go home and play games anymore. Instead, I wanted to hug my family and never let them go. The day before we left, Cole rewarded us all with a 1-minute phone call. As much as I wanted to hear Amelia's voice, I was kinda nervous. I hoped she wasn't mad at me anymore. The phone started to ring, but some guy picked up. I asked where Amelia was, but he said she was in the shower. Then the line went dead. My 1 minute was up. Who was that dude? Was she having an affair? We were still married. And we have a child together. Furious, I ran into Brittany's tent, wanting to get back at my cheating wife. Brittany came toward me and was about to kiss me, but I couldn't go through with it. So I dodged out of the way, mumbled out sorry, then hurried out of there. The next day, I finally got off the island, and I went straight home to confront Amelia. I opened the door to see a man standing there holding my little Aura. How dare he? I yelled out, "Get away from my daughter!" Suddenly, Amelia appeared. "Cooper, stop! It's Rob!" I processed this information. Oh wait, he was Rob, her half-brother. Oops. I'd never met him before as he'd been living abroad. I quickly muttered out an apology to him. How embarrassing. I noticed Amelia was giving me this weird look. Then she said, "Wow, Cooper, you look so different." Oh yeah, before we were sent home, each of us were treated to a little makeover. A new haircut, new clothes, and a shave. And the clean eating and exercise meant I'd lost 20 pounds. Guess Amelia just couldn't resist this new hottie in town. She went straight for one big hug. So, in the end, Amelia forgave me for being a massive jerk. Now I have a new job. It's pretty boring, but I enjoy coming home and spending time with my family. As for gaming, I still do it, but in moderation. Only Tuesdays and Thursdays, but I make sure I switch it off by 10 p.m. Then I go and cuddle my wife. The gaming world is great and all, but I've come to learn that there's something even better in life, and that's making memories in the real world with my girls.
You see that sad girl sitting there in a flood of tears? Yeah, I know, she's pretty hard to miss. Well, that was me a few months ago. My boyfriend had literally just broken up with me, and I had to pack my stuff out of his place ASAP with a resentful heart. But thinking back, if he hadn't broken my heart, I wouldn't have fallen into this super awkward and ridiculous situation. Oh, I forgot. I'm Ava. I'm 22, and I suck at love. So, anyway, after crying like a newborn, I realized I needed a trip away to free my mind, just like Julia Roberts' character did in the movie Eat, Pray, Love. But I could only afford to do the low-budget version. So, I went on Airbnb and found a reasonably priced room to rent in this idyllic beach house. And it gets even better. The owner, Hazel, is out most of the time, so it would be like renting the whole house with the price of one room. Awesome! Reserved! I needed to get out of this emotional hellhole ASAP. As expected, Hazel wasn't home when I arrived, and I had to find the hidden key under a plant pot by the door and let myself in. And oh my, it was like stepping into a life-size retro dollhouse. From the chic furniture to the funky wallpaper, I loved it here. This Hazel girl has got some taste. Ooh, there was even a record player. If I'd have known, I would have brought my vinyls with me. But hey, her collection wasn't too shabby. I have to admit that the idea of having a cool friend like this Hazel girl sounded pretty awesome. I was determined to actually meet her because, yeah, it's been 5 wonderful days staying here and I still haven't run into her. So one night, I settled down in the living room and watched a movie while waiting for her to come home. She eventually showed up at 2 a.m. Ugh, this girl wasn't kidding about coming home late. I greeted her and said, "Hey, I saw you have an Exacta 35mm film camera. That's so cool. Also, would you mind if I take a look at your vinyls?" She looked a bit confused and replied, "I have a what?" "Oh, you mean those rusty old things? They're my brother's. I doubt he'd mind. He always talks to me non-stop about them. So I think he'd be happy there's someone in this house who speaks the same language as him." Ha! Oh, they're her brothers? How very interesting. This got me thinking. Is he handsome? And what about his personality? Is he an arty type with a kind soul? Daydreaming about this mystery guy became a regular occurrence for me. Oh gosh, was I crushing on a guy I'd never even met? How desperate was I? One day I came home from grocery shopping. I was totally exhausted. So I threw the groceries in the kitchen and jumped straight onto the pile of blankets on my bed. Only it wasn't just the simple blankets. What? Someone was under them. We banged heads. Ouch! I removed the blankets to catch this pervert out. Huh? I know this guy. It was my ex. What in God's name was he doing here? Oh, for the record, this wasn't my current ex. This was Nolan. We used to date back in high school, but I'd not spoken to him in a long time. So it turns out he's Hazel's mystery brother. Ew. This whole time I'd been accidentally crushing on my jerky ex-boyfriend. This made sense now, as we always did have lots in common, but ugh. Thank you, universe, for ruining my vacation. With a dagger stare, I asked him why he had the audacity to be napping in my bed. He snorted, then said, "Your bed? This is my house, in my room. The question is, what are you doing here?" Reluctantly, I explained everything to him, and it turns out he was meant to be away on a 2-month business trip, so Hazel put his room on Airbnb without asking him. The problem being, he came back early. He just shrugged and said, "But I'm home now, so can you please take your stuff and get out of here? I'll get Hazel to refund you or whatever." This made me mad. I'd paid for the room. I had rights, so I was staying put. So I told him, "I'm not going anywhere. You'll just have to sleep on the couch." He didn't seem happy about it. In fact, he grumbled to himself as he left the room. But at least he left. I thought this would be it, but oh, how wrong I was. And that's when the war for the bedroom began. The next morning, I awoke to hear these weird squawking noises. Then I felt something flap in my face. Sleepily, I tried to whack it away and opened my eyes. Staring back at me was this massive gull. Ugh! Nolan! There were about a dozen of them hanging out in my room, all pecking and flapping around my stuff. It took me over an hour to shoo them out of the window. Afterward, I was so mad that I locked myself in the bathroom. After 30 minutes, Nolan thudded on the door. He urgently needed to use it. I opened the door with a smirk on my face and brushed past him. I soon heard his disgruntled shouts. Yep, I'd wrapped the toilet paper with duct tape. Ha! I wasn't done with him yet, so that evening I hid some cookie crumbs on the couch, and he woke up the next day covered in ant bites. He was like a real-life dot-to-dot. Yes, it's 2-1, loser. This went on for a couple of days. Nolan switched the toaster settings, so my breakfast was ruined. Yuck. So I sneakily downloaded a fake cracked screen app on his phone and placed it on the floor. When he picked up his phone, he totally freaked out and started blaming his dog. It was so funny. All this pranking was exhausting, so I was kind of relieved when Nolan went out one night, and I could just chill on the couch and watch a movie. Suddenly, the power went out. Great. The switch must have tripped or something. I put on the torch on my phone and was about to go and check it out when my phone rang. All I could hear was someone deep breathing into it. What the hell? I hung up and my body started to shake. All of a sudden, the door burst open and Ghostface was standing there. Terrified, I held my head and screamed like a banshee. But then I heard somebody call my name. Ava! Ava! It's me, Nolan. It's okay. I was so relieved to see him that I jumped into his arms and cried into his sweater. Please don't cry. I've got you, he said in a soft voice while he held me. I felt so secure and safe. What was that he was holding in his hand? It was a ghost face mask. It was him! He knew I hated horror movies. What a jerk! I pushed him away and shouted, "What the hell? Are you crazy?" He just smiled and replied, "It was worth it, 'cause the hug was so sweet." Man, I hate this jerk. After that, I avoided him. Okay, I did catch myself looking over at him and getting this weird, warm feeling. One time, he was playing with his dog on the beach, and I watched on from the porch. Did I have a crush on my ex? My God, I hope not, 'cause that would be pathetic. But I had to admit that, although his pranks were really annoying, they'd also been kind of fun. It made me reminisce on the old days when we were together, and we were so happy back then. But nothing lasts forever. Hazel appeared with 2 cups of coffee, and we started chatting. I told her how annoying her brother was. She laughed, then replied, "I know, sorry. I didn't know you guys used to date. I wouldn't have rented the room to you if I had. I get that it must be awkward for you, especially as you were the one who broke up with him, right?" I did what? He was the one who broke up with me because he was moving away at the time and couldn't handle the long-distance relationship. And worse, he did it over a freaking letter. She looked at me confused, then said, "Oh, that's peculiar, as he told me he wrote you a letter telling you about his feelings. Then you shouted at him that it was over." I replied, "Part of his letter said, 'I love you and all, but this long-distance stuff is like madly scary.' So it kind of seemed obvious to me that he wanted to end things." She shook her head. "No, I swear he just wanted to tell you how much he loved you. But obviously, my dearest brother totally sucks at writing. What an idiot. I told him he should have let me proofread his dumb love letter." So it turns out our breakup had all been a misunderstanding. I mean, come on, who writes love letters anymore? Anyway, the past was the past, so I decided it was best to leave it there. Besides, I only had a few days left here. On my last day, I packed my things and said goodbye to Hazel. I had to admit that I was really gonna miss it here. Nolan was nowhere to be found. He must be celebrating 'cause he finally had his room back. Whatever. It's not like I needed to say goodbye to him. I took a cab to the train station. On the way, I couldn't shake Nolan out of my head. He needed to know the truth about the breakup. I couldn't let him think that I was a cruel person back then. "Stop! Turn around!" I shouted out to the cab driver. I ran back into the house. Hazel stared at me in shock. Why aren't you at the train station?" Oh, wow. I couldn't believe they wanted to get rid of me so fast. I was about to leave when Hazel continued, "Nolan just took a cab there to talk to you. Let me call him." Nolan answered the phone and asked me to meet him at a lighthouse nearby. Oh gosh, I was so nervous. What did he want to tell me? Maybe Hazel had told him about our convo the other morning. I spotted him. He was holding something. Gee, I hoped it wasn't another letter. He blushed while looking at me. Then he said in a shy voice, You forgot something in my room." Then he handed me a bag. I opened it, and there was my lingerie. Oh, great. How could I forget them? So he wasn't going to tell me anything. But wait a minute. These weren't mine, and they still had the tags on. He giggled and said, "Sorry, I swear that was the last prank. I just needed a reason to see you."
Hazel told me everything. I don't blame you for our breakup. I blame my poor writing skills. The point is, I love you. I just love you. You're the only girl I've ever loved. Still to this day. I've never loved anyone else.
Oh gosh, I couldn't believe it. Although I was pretty sure he'd just quoted that from a movie or series or something. As we all know, he sucks with words, and it sounded familiar. Anyway, I threw the bag of lingerie in his face and then wrapped my arms around him. So, from then on, the room war stopped. Not because I was leaving, but because we became roommates. Let me tell you this. Actually, there's not much to tell. Only, when your boyfriend writes you a letter, please make sure you read it very carefully. Actually, scrap that. Just tell him to get with the times and to text you. Hey you! Quit standing there and come clean my locker already! You're destined to be a maid, just like your mom! Suddenly, a whole group of kids erupted into laughter, and I just froze. I glanced back, wondering how they knew my secret, but then I realized they were mocking some other girl. Phew, what a relief! This new school seemed intense, and when I walked into the classroom, 3 of my new classmates wouldn't stop staring at me, but I just ignored them. But at lunch, one of them came over to me and said,
I guess your family is super rich, right?
I didn't know what to say, so I just replied with, no, they're kinda normal. Why? Then he raised his voice.
How dare you try to sit here then? This is our table. Move!
I immediately got up and ran to an empty seat on the corner table. That's when some kid told me that the 3 rich kids were Brent, Sophia, and Jasmine. He told me that the best way to stay out of trouble was to avoid them at all costs, because their parents basically funded the whole school, and so everyone had to respect them. But I couldn't avoid them, because the very next day, Sophia came running up to me and said, Why do you keep your family a secret? Come on, spill! I freaked out. Why did she suddenly ask me that? But then Jasmine appeared and said, Girl, that bag you wore yesterday is totally sold out. How did you get your hands on one? Oh, right. They were probably talking about my Insta post from yesterday. And so I said, Oh, my dad bought it for me in Paris. Sophia's eyes went wide and she said, OMG, your dad is so cool. Why are you wearing it today? Shoot. They were going to catch me out. I had to think fast. My parents don't want me to show it off, so they said I can't bring it to school. Sophia and Jasmine burst out laughing and said my family sounded cool, but weird. If only they knew the truth. The bag wasn't even mine. It was just from a modeling job I did to make some extra pocket money. In fact, my parents were super poor. My mom worked as a maid, and my dad was a security guard. Obviously, I couldn't afford fancy designer bags, but the rich kids didn't need to know that, right? At lunch, I saw them walking towards my table, and Brent said,
What do your parents do? Just tell us. We won't tell anyone.
I told them my dad was the CEO of a big fashion company, and my mom worked at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I wasn't proud of my lie, but the alternative was being treated like the girl I saw on my first day at this school. And I didn't want that at all. They all looked amazed, and Jasmine said,
That makes sense why you're so pretty and smart.
Then Brent jumped in and said,
But then why are you a scholarship kid,
I just smiled and kept quiet. I couldn't think of a good lie and didn't want to take this any further. I thought they would leave me alone after that, but they kept approaching me and even started to ask me to join them at their rich kids' table. I couldn't say no. But when they asked me to hang out on weekends, I made up excuses. Not because I didn't want to join, but because there was no way on earth I could afford it. I didn't even dare to ask my parents, as they were working so hard to save up for my college tuition. I was so afraid of my lies catching up with me, so whenever I modeled for high-end stuff, I'd post a pic to my Insta. One time, I shared a photo of me wearing super expensive heels and captioned it, "Thanks, Dad. Love you." Sometimes, I even took it to the next level and edited travel photos so it looked like I'd spend the weekend in Paris. And one time, I even photoshopped me driving in a Lamborghini. It was a lot of effort, but it was better than being mocked for being poor, like what happened to me in my last school. I couldn't go through that again. One time, I decided to go shopping with them, and it was crazy to watch them buying everything in sight without even thinking about it. I couldn't even dream of a life like that. But when we got to the bag shop, Jasmine pointed to a fancy-looking bag and said she'd bought it yesterday. Then she asked me, "You probably already have it, right?" I just grinned and said, "Yep, my mom bought it for me last time she was in Milan." But then Jasmine said, "Yay! Okay, cool. So let's both wear them on Monday. Everyone will be jealous." That weekend, I felt sick. I had to buy that bag. I decided to raid my piggy bank, but when I got to the shop, I realized I only had 1/10 of the amount needed. I was so shocked. Who would spend that much on a bag? While I was standing there, a woman came in and bought it without hesitation. Why was it so easy for rich people? I decided to follow her just out of curiosity and saw her going to the restroom. I couldn't believe it. She just left her new bag by the sink and then went into the cubicle. I looked around and saw the coast was clear, so I quickly grabbed the bag and walked out of the restroom. I ignored the guilt about stealing it from her and headed home. All I could think about was what would happen if I walked up to school on Monday without the bag. But as soon as I reached my room, the regret was eating away at me. Would I go to jail if they find out? My parents would kill me. Well, Monday morning rolled around, and I proudly wore my new bag to school. Brent, Jasmine, and Sophia were so surprised and said I had the limited edition version, which was twice the price as the normal one. This made me feel even more guilty. But from the looks I got all day, it was worth it. Everyone saw me as one of the rich kids now. Soon it would be summer vacation, and Brent said he had a holiday house in Hawaii and suggested we all go for 1 week together. No way I could afford that. So I lied and said I had to go to Paris with my dad for an event. But then Jasmine said her parents were away, so we could have a party at her house instead that weekend. She suggested we dress up and said she couldn't wait to see my clothes I wore outside of school. Oh no, I was dreading this. Brent said he would pick me up at home and drive me there, but I told him to meet me at school instead, as my parents were so strict. Oh my gosh, all of this lying was making me feel exhausted. But no way could I let them see my dilapidated old house, especially as I'd lied and told them we lived in a villa with a pool and golf course. My lying was becoming a big problem. I mean, where would I get a dress from? I lay there worrying about it, and suddenly I heard my parents talking in their room. My mom was saying she'd finally saved enough to send me to college and asked my dad if he could deposit it in their bank tomorrow, as she had to work at some party. Then she said she'd been keeping it in her closet for safekeeping. I thought about it for a while. I mean, the money was for me anyways, right? So what harm would it do if I just took it now? The next morning, I snuck into their room and took all of the money and rushed out to the mall to buy a gorgeous purple dress and sparkly shoes. This was absolutely the life that I deserved. After that, I took an Uber to school, where Brent, Jasmine, and Sophia picked me up. I had like a million missed calls from my mom and dad, but I ignored it and turned my phone off. I just wanted to enjoy a full day living like a true rich kid. Brent drove us towards Hampton's Country Club, and I couldn't believe it. Jasmine's family owned this place. Wow! When we arrived, a valet came over, but Brent was so rude to him. He shouted at him and said, "Listen, buddy, this car cost $4 million. If you even leave one tiny mark, you'll be paying for it for the rest of your life." I turned around to see the valet's reaction. Then my jaw almost hit the floor. It was my dad! He saw me and looked surprised, but before he could say anything, we walked off. We hung out in the country club for a bit. Then in the evening, we drove to Jasmine's house. Her place was insane. She had a tennis court, her own cinema, and don't even get me started on how many cars her family owned. We sat down to eat in the dining room, and I kid you not, there were 4 maids waiting to serve us. We each had our own one. I was too busy being shocked to notice my maid walking towards me, but then I heard a familiar voice.
Sweetie, what are you doing here?
Mom? I was horrified. The party she'd mentioned yesterday. This was the party. Oh no, this was a disaster. Jasmine looked surprised and said,
Do you know her?
So I said, Oh, she used to be a maid at our house. My mom looked crushed and said,
A maid? How could you say that?
Then Jasmine got annoyed and said,
Don't you dare speak to my guest like that. Get out of my sight.
My mom ran off, almost in tears, and for the next little while, Brent and Sophia treated her terribly too. Brent even asked her to clean his shoes. My mom was being treated like this all because of me. I could see she was really upset, and she accidentally dropped some sauce on Jasmine's dress. And then Jasmine just lost it. She pushed my mom and screamed,
Are you crazy? Do you know how much this dress cost?
Well, that was it. I'd had enough. I ran over and helped her up. Mom, are you okay?
Mom?
Jasmine, Brent, and Sophia all shouted. So I said, Yes, she is my mom. And how dare you treat her like that? Tears were pouring down my cheeks, and I felt so humiliated. Needless to say, they kicked us out, and Jasmine even threw some $10 bills at us and said,
Take it. Go back to your broken down house. You're stinking up our air.
I couldn't stop crying. It was exactly how they treated that girl on my first day at school. I didn't have much choice but to tell my parents the truth. That I'd lied to everyone, stolen the bag, and even stolen their money just so I could pretend to be rich. I'd never been so ashamed in all my life, especially after everything my parents had done for me. It took some time, but they eventually forgave me, and we moved to a small town out in the countryside so I could start at a new school. I never wanted to see those rich kids again. Now, I'm working hard to finish school and save enough money for college, and I've realized that being rich didn't even make me happy. My family might be poor, but they're the nicest people I've ever met, and you can't buy that in any designer shop.
All we can do now is pray, the doctor said as he left the room. I looked at Ethan lying on the hospital bed, surrounded by medical equipment, and felt my heart sink. Then Elliot came over to me and said, Charles, I think you should maybe go home and rest. There's nothing you can do right now. Yeah, Elliot was right. Now I had to be stronger than ever, and in fact, if it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't have made it through this crazy time. Although Elliot was a newbie in our department, we'd become close very quickly, and I was so grateful for her. I smiled at Elliot and offered to drive her home. And then I went to see my mate Cooper. He'd just got back from living abroad. We'd been friends for years. We first met at a gay pride party. He was bisexual and I was gay. At least, I had been. But now, I wasn't so sure. You see, I realized that every time I was with Elliot, my heart was beating faster than usual. Could it be that? I got so lost in my thoughts, I didn't even see Cooper opening the door. He looked at me and said, Dude, what's wrong with you? You look like you've seen a ghost. I told him I was in deep trouble and really needed his advice. Lying on his couch, I explained how my boyfriend Ethan was in hospital, but that I'd started having feelings for a girl. Cooper looked at me with sympathy in his eyes, but then he just nudged me and said, Charles, welcome to my life. It's okay to have feelings for both men and women. It's normal. I asked him what I should do, and he said I should just listen to my heart and let it decide. And then he winked at me and asked to see a photo of this girl who was turning me bi. I opened my phone and showed him, and he looked shocked. His eyes went wide, and I asked him if he thought she was hot too. But then he said something that made my blood run cold. She's my ex-girlfriend, bro. Whoa, what? This couldn't be happening. Then Cooper told me how they used to date and had even set a wedding date. But then something had happened and they'd broken up. This was too weird. What were the chances? I wanted to ask him more about what she was like and why they broke up. But from the look on his face, it was too painful to speak about. Plus, it also made me feel a bit uncomfortable. I could barely sleep that night, worrying about Ethan and thinking about Elliot and Cooper. It was also strange. The next day, when I was concentrating on my work, my manager suddenly came over and said, "Charles, congrats. You're doing so well. I didn't expect one of your team members that you managed to get promoted so quickly." Huh? What was he talking about? No one had been promoted. I was so confused. He noticed how puzzled I looked and said, "Didn't you know? Elliot took over Ethan's role as director." What? How did this happen? I looked at him in surprise and he continued, "Word on the street is that Elliot is the president's daughter, so it's normal for her to take over. She clearly hid her identity well, didn't she?" Then he just laughed and walked off. Wait, if Elliot was the president's daughter, that meant that she was related to Ethan. She was Ethan's sister, right? Oh, this couldn't be. She'd acted like she didn't even know him at the hospital that day. I quickly ran to find her and said, "Hey, Elliot, why didn't you tell me you were Ethan's sister? You know that me and your brother are in love. Why would you hide this from me?" Elliot just sighed and said, "Well, actually, I didn't want to hide this from you. But my parents sent me to help Ethan to run the company. I don't have any experience, so I wanted everyone to treat me like a normal newbie so I could actually learn. That's why I hid my identity. I'm so sorry." I guess she'd done the right thing, as I'd heard lots of gossip behind my back when I'd started dating Ethan. So I sympathized with her. But now it all made sense. The reason I had a crush on Elliot. She looked so similar to Ethan. The same deep blue eyes, the same cheekbones, even the same gestures. She also had the same shrimp allergy, and they both had this pen-spinning habit when they're deep in thoughts. How had I not noticed this before? What if I wasn't in love with Elliot? I was just in love with how she was so similar to Ethan. Okay, that made me feel a lot better. So it was Ethan I loved after all. The next day I went to visit Ethan with a huge bouquet of sunflowers, his favorite. When I was walking through the entrance, I spotted Cooper. "Hey, we meet again," I called out. "What are you doing here?" He told me how he was visiting his ex who'd been in an accident, and I said I was visiting my boyfriend who'd been in an accident. "Let's walk together," I said. "What room's your ex in?" 1502, Cooper said. "Are you sure?" I mean, that was Ethan's room, I thought. Then it hit me. "Hang on, is your ex called Ethan?" I asked, really hoping it wasn't. "How did you know that?" Cooper said. "Because Ethan is my boyfriend," I said. This was way too awkward. How was it possible to have this many coincidences? I couldn't believe it. Cooper was shocked too, and said that Ethan was the reason he and Elliot had broken up. He'd fallen in love with Ethan. And Ethan's family had been so upset by this, they kicked Ethan out of the house. Oh, so that's why Ethan never talked to his family and told me to never ask about them. After that mess, unfortunately, their relationship didn't work out. So Cooper packed up his stuff and decided to go study abroad to start things fresh. Oh man, this was a lot to digest. I couldn't help but wonder how Elliot had felt when she'd found out her husband-to-be was in love with her brother. Cooper and I were so shocked, but not as shocked as we were going to be a moment later. We were about to walk into Ethan's room when we heard Elliot's voice. She was speaking in a mean tone, saying, "Ethan, you just wait. How will you feel when your boyfriend falls in love with me? It'll be painful, right? I'll make him leave you and it'll serve you right, after everything you've done to me. It's time for a taste of your own medicine." I froze when I heard her saying that. I turned to Cooper and he was just as shocked as I was. Suddenly he burst through the door and I stormed in after him. Elliot almost fell off her chair in surprise at seeing us. Why are you two here together?" she said. "Hey, stranger," Cooper said. "Come on, Elliot, give it up already. It's been a long time. Things were over between us. Just let go and move on." Cooper was so angry, but Elliot just laughed and said, "Get over yourself, Cooper. It's not about you. I don't have feelings for you anymore. I just want revenge on my brother. It was so cruel of him to steal you away and ruin my life like that." Then with eyes full of hatred, she turned and looked at poor Ethan lying there. I was furious. I realized exactly what Elliot had been doing. Deliberately flirting with me to steal me away from Ethan. How could she? I confronted her on the spot. "What's wrong with you? Why would you treat me like this? And your poor brother? I didn't expect..." Before I could continue, though, she interrupted me and said, "Charles, wait, listen to me, please. It's true that was my intention at first, but then I fell in love with you." And I thought you were starting to fall for me too. I'm so sorry. Elliot then tried to reach for my hand, but I was disgusted. I pushed her away and said, "Get away from me. I don't want to see you anymore." Elliot started crying, but I was too upset to be bothered. I was just so horrified that she'd do this. I was so disappointed in myself, too, for falling into her trap. Poor Ethan. He didn't deserve any of this. I stared at him lying there on the hospital bed. What if he knew? I kept staring at him and swear I saw his fingers twitch. Oh my gosh, was he waking up? Cooper quickly went to the doctor, while I stayed with Ethan and tried to talk to him. Ethan, are you awake?" The doctors ran a few tests and said that Ethan had finally regained consciousness and would wake up properly soon. Cooper and I were over the moon. I was so relieved he was going to be okay. And it seemed like Elliot also felt the same as she stood quietly in a corner of the room, tears streaming down her eyes to the corner of her mouth that turned up in the most subtle smile. And as expected, about a week later, Ethan opened his eyes. I'd never been so happy in my life. He started physical therapy, and I spent a lot of time helping him. Of course, Cooper popped in to visit too, and we all had a good laugh about how connected we all were. This must have been real fate, because calling this coincidence would be an understatement. As for Elliot, she just disappeared. But then a few days later, when Ethan, Cooper, and I were chatting together in the hospital, an email popped up on my phone. It was Elliot, and she said she was so sorry for what she'd done, and she just hoped that Ethan and I could forgive her. Then she said she wished us only happiness. I told Ethan and Cooper the good news, and we were all so relieved. Maybe we could all be friends after all. I mean, Elliot might become my sister-in-law one day, right? Life can be so funny. I'm just so glad Cooper appeared when he did, and everything came out into the open. I'd never forgive myself if I'd left Ethan for his sister. Ethan was always the one for me.
I was standing outside of college chatting to my friends when suddenly a police car pulled up, and from the car's window, a handsome police officer waved at me, then told me to hurry up. I excitedly waved back at him, said goodbye to my friends, and rushed to him in front of their admiring eyes. So, I'm Daisy, and the handsome cop is Levi, my amazing, brave boyfriend. We first met at the library in town. I was there for my studies, and he was looking for some crime books. We started dating, and now a year later, we're madly in love. There are so many things that I love about dating a cop, such as seeing him in his uniform. It never fails to make me beam with pride. And I'm not gonna lie, he has abs of steel due to all of his workouts. Swoon! Besides, he has the cutest quirky habits. Like, when we go to a restaurant or the theater, he always scans it first to check if it's safe. But as good as being with him is, there are a few bum points, such as his unpredictable work schedule. Day, night, weekends, you name it, he works it. Then, when we finally managed to plan something, he sometimes got an emergency phone call and had to bail on me. This sucked, especially when it was my sister's wedding. But without a doubt, the most annoying thing of all is his popularity with other girls. They're like moths to a flame around him, especially this one colleague of his, Ellie. One time, Levi brought his colleague Brad over while I was there studying. I heard Brad remark,
"Levi, I never thought you'd end up with a bookworm. I thought you'd end up with Ellie. Everyone can see you two have a strong connection."
Levi tried laughing it off and saying that it was nonsense. But the jealousy rose up in me. By the time Brad left, I was really upset about it. So I packed up my books and went to leave. He stopped me and asked me what was wrong. Trying my best not to cry, I blurted out, "Why aren't you with Ellie? You spend all your time with her." He shook his head, smirked, then said,
"Ignore Brad. He's a joker. And yeah, I spend time with Ellie. I work with her. But it's you I love, and everyone knows it. In fact, why don't you move in? Then we can spend more time together."
My sadness was soon overlapped by happiness, and I jumped into his arms and squealed out, "Really? Yes, for sure!" This was so exciting. I moved in a few weeks later, and at first, living with Levi was the best thing ever. But over time, there were little niggling things that started to play on my mind. For example, one day I was chatting to the new neighbor when Levi arrived home and in a stone-cold voice demanded I go inside. Then he sternly told me never to talk to strangers. But come on, I'm a naturally chatty, friendly girl who loves talking to people and making new friends. I don't know, I guess it was me overreacting? I mean, he was just looking out for me, right? But then his need for control worsened when once I arranged to meet my friends in town. Levi was going to come too, but then he had a last-minute work call and couldn't. When I said I'd just get a taxi, he freaked out and told me I couldn't go. After I got upset about it, he reluctantly agreed to let me go. He called a reputable taxi firm to pick me up, then told me I had to be back by 10 p.m. But after a few drinks, I lost all sense of time. I was just having too much fun. I was dancing with my friend when Levi stormed in, grabbed my arm, and pulled me out of there. Everyone was staring at us, not helped because he was in his cop uniform. I even heard one man tut out,
"It's always the innocent-looking ones, isn't it?"
It was so embarrassing. At home, I sat there brooding while he got me a glass of water. When he tried passing it to me, I jumped up to my feet and screamed at him, "You're being ridiculous, and thanks to you, everyone in the bar thinks I'm some sort of criminal. I don't need a curfew."
"It's not like that,"
he sighed. But I was so upset, I brushed past him and slammed the bedroom door behind me. I cried myself to sleep. I hated arguing with him. I gave him silent treatment throughout the next day. But then in the evening, he arrived home with a gift box and apologized for making me sad. That was so sweet. I gave him a hug and said, "I'm sorry too." Then I opened the box. It was a really lovely watch. I noticed that it had an extra button on it, but I didn't think much of it. I stared down at it admirably as he fixed it on my wrist. That's how caring my boyfriend was. So I decided to buy him something too. The next day after college, I went to the mall. Suddenly, Levi called me and asked me where I was. I wanted the gift to be a surprise, so I told him I was at home. Crossly, he said,
"Daisy, don't lie to me. I know you're at High Hill Shopping Mall. Come home at once."
Huh? How did he know that? I gave up on finding a gift and went home. When he got back, I asked him how he knew where I was, and I saw him briefly glance at my watch. Then, he admitted that he had GPS fitted to it, but it was only so he could keep me safe. What? I wasn't a kid anymore. How could he use it to follow me? We had a huge fight, and I told him he was controlling and crazy, and he needed to stop treating me like a little kid. Then I shut myself away in the bedroom. The next day, when I woke up, Levi had already left for work. I was so wound up, so I decided to go for a jog to clear my head. Obviously, I left the watch at home, and also my phone. When I got back, I was about to head for the shower when I heard my phone ringing. It was Levi. Then I noticed that I had 50 missed calls and a ton of messages from him. What? This wasn't normal. I'd only been gone for an hour at the most. Anyways, I put the watch back on, then suddenly the door banged open and Levi stormed in, and he yelled at me,
"Are you okay? Where did you go? Why didn't you answer my calls?"
This sucked, as I love him, but I knew I couldn't live like this anymore. So I told him I needed my freedom, then headed for the door. He looked so mad as he grabbed my hand, pulled me into the upstairs room, then locked me inside. I banged on the door and pleaded with him to let me out.
"Daisy, trust me. This is for your own good. You're not safe out there."
Then I heard his footsteps trail off and knew he'd left. I curled up into a ball and cried myself to sleep. When I woke up, it was getting pretty dark out there. I searched the room for something to help me and found a rope ladder. The perks of living with a prepared cop. I used it to climb out of the window, but as soon as I reached the ground, 2 men appeared. Then suddenly, the world turned black. When I opened my eyes, I realized that I was in a dark, damp room and I was tied up. The 2 men were sitting by the door and talking to each other. I began to panic. I'd seen enough movies to know that this was bad. One of the men looked over at me, and I quickly closed my eyes. But it was too late. He'd seen I was awake, so he walked over and said,
"Ah, welcome back, sweetheart."
Panicked, I asked, "Who are you? Why me?" He sniggered out,
"Ah, yes. If only that boyfriend of yours was here. Then we could ask him."
Then he picked up his phone, and seconds later, I heard Levi's voice in the other line.
"Hello? Remember me? We seem to have something of yours."
I heard the fear in Levi's voice.
"Let her go! Your wife's death wasn't her fault. It's your fault she's dead. Now it's your turn to lose the woman you love. Come here alone if you want to see her face again. And don't even think about calling for backup."
He hung up the phone, then peered down at me before he kicked the empty barrel next to me. I jolted back, and he laughed. It was terrifying. Not long after that, they dragged a beaten-up man into the room. "Levi! Oh no!" Levi managed to look at me, forced a smile, and slurred out,
"My flower girl. Don't worry, I'm here now."
The gang laughed at this. Then he stopped in front of Levi and said,
"I think you and me need a little chat. Let's call it man business."
I knew I needed to find a way to help him. But what? That's when I looked down at my watch. It already had GPS, so perhaps the extra button did something. I struggled to press it, which wasn't easy with roped hands, trust me. But eventually, I managed to. By this point, Levi was unconscious, and I started sobbing. I didn't want to lose him. Not like this. The one man set something up next to him. "Oh no, it was a bomb!" He sneered out.
"You have 30 minutes left to say goodbye to your lover, boy."
Then the man left. I called Levi's name and sobbed out how I loved him. I honestly thought we were both going to die there. And watching the timer count down to our doom was the worst feeling ever. Suddenly, the door burst open. At first, I thought it was those men back again. But instead, Brad and his team rushed over, saw the bomb, then quickly got both me and Levi out of there. I was pushed to the ground just before there was a big bang, and the house exploded. On the way to the hospital, Ellie explained everything to me. So, turns out this involved a difficult criminal case that happened last year. Levi had been investigating a group of drug dealers, but an incident happened, and the gang's leader's wife accidentally fell from the building and died. They arrested most of the dealers, but some got away, including the gang leader. Then recently, Levi had received images of me outside college and our house from them, and took this as a threat to my safety. Well, that explained all of Levi's controlling and weird behavior. I felt so bad for misjudging Levi. He was the sweetest, bravest man, and I loved him so much. I stayed by his side as he recovered in hospital. Then one day, he finally opened his eyes, looked at me, and muttered out,
"There's my flower girl."
I hugged him, gently, of course. It was such a relief to know he was going to be okay. The gang is still out there somewhere, but hopefully they'll catch them soon. I do worry about it, but it's okay, as I know I have Levi to protect me. After all, he's my real-life action hero, and I know that with him by my side, we'll get through anything.
This shift was boring. So as I handed the 2 coffees over to the girl, I couldn't help but daydream about what to have for lunch. Excuse me, why the attitude? The girl sounded annoyed. Then before I could say anything, she shouted, "I want to speak to your manager." The boy next to her tried to keep her calm and asked her to go outside first. Then he said to me, "I'm sorry about my sister." I mumbled, "It's okay," as I handed him $20 change. "Oh, just keep it," He smiled, but then he started apologizing, took the change, then left. What just happened? I took out my phone to check my face. Oh, great. I looked like I was sucking on wasps. And all because I was thinking about whether I should have pasta or a sandwich. Well, to be honest, what just happened wasn't new to me, but it never seemed to get any easier. Let me start at the beginning. So, I'm Isabel. I just graduated from high school and was soon to be a freshman at college. Ever since I can remember, my parents, friends, and teachers always asked me the same questions, such as, "What's wrong?" and "Why the long face?" When I told them that I was fine, they would always be like, "Are you sure?" Or, "If there's a problem, you need to tell us, okay?" Oh, it was so frustrating. There was even this one time where my teacher had to stop in the middle of a lesson to ask me not to look at her like that because my stare made her feel uncomfortable. What? I was just really focused. Then I eventually found out in high school. It was on a normal sunny day. I was sitting at the bus stop with my best friend Jocelyn when some guy came over and asked for directions. I looked up and the guy got startled and began to stutter. "Oh, sorry for bothering you." And then he left in a hurry. Huh? This was so confusing. He didn't even give me a chance to get a word out. So I turned to Jocelyn and asked if she might know what the guy's problem was. Maybe it's because you look like you want to kick his butt. Then she told me how everyone at school thought I was an arrogant snob. What? That was ridiculous. Why would they think of me like that? I asked her this, and she took out a mirror and held it to my face. Well, see it for yourself. I took a deep look in the mirror, and oh my God, she was right. I did look a bit moody, but I swear I wasn't. Not at all. The next day, Jocelyn sent me a link to an article. It was about people having a naturally grumpy face, also known as resting bee face, aka RBF. You know the word. No wonder nobody likes me and wants to be friends with me. Well, except Jocelyn, thank God. She saw beyond my sullen-looking exterior. I wanted college to be different, so I was determined to say goodbye to snobby Isabel and say hello to happy, joyful Isabel. I just needed to smile all the time. Sounds easy, right? So on my first day at college, I walked into the lecture hall with the biggest smile fixed on my face. I hoped I looked friendly and not like that creepy cat from Alice in Wonderland. But then my smile immediately vanished when I saw him. It was the guy who wanted to tip me $20 and then ran off with it. Ugh, why was he here? I was trying to come across as a sweet, friendly girl, and I didn't need him spreading rude rumors about me. So the easiest solution was to avoid this guy as much as possible. Only the universe had other ideas, and I found myself stuck doing a group project with him. Ugh, great. We all sat in a circle, and I found out he's called Carter. Our group leader, Carla, assigned each of us a task. While listening to her, I tried to hold my smile as brightly as I could. Keep it steady, steady, I thought to myself over and over. But you know what? Fake smiling is hard work, and it causes serious face ache. Then my cheek started twitching, so to avoid looking like a weirdo, I decided to take a break from smiling. And that's when Carla noticed me and asked, "Did I say something wrong?" Everybody was gawping at me. I could feel myself blushing. Great, now I probably resembled a grumpy tomato. That's when Carter spoke up. "Just continue. We'll say if anything's unclear." Thank you, Carter. Now, I know how Lois Lane felt after being rescued by Superman. This felt even more intense than the movie. And oh, he was actually kinda cute too. I felt a little bummed out after the group meeting. All I wanted to do was make some friends, but I'd already given Carla the wrong impressions about myself. I'm not a big party goer, but perhaps the big freshman party happening on Friday would be a good place to make friends, right? Feeling down, I sat on the side of the bench by the college sports field and just looked up to the sky. Then I noticed Carter playing soccer with some guys. So I watched him play for a bit. It could have been the lighting, or the fact he looked so hot when sweaty, but I couldn't take my eyes off him. Maybe I should try talking to him. The next day, I walked into the lecture hall and spotted Carter sitting alone reading a book. This was my chance. I could sit next to him and start a convo. Okay, Isabel, keep it cool. Oh no, not cool. Cool means arrogant. Keep it happy. You got this. Smile on. Check. Hi, is this seat? Carter looked up. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know this was your seat. Then he gathered his stuff and moved to another table. What? Ugh, curse you, RBF. I wasn't giving up this easily, so I searched online and read that makeup could help fix my situation. So, I applied makeup around my mouth and eyes, then went to my lecture. Only during the group discussion, Carter whispered to me, Are you sick? As you look a bit pale. Why don't you go home? I can take notes for you. After hearing him say that, I actually did feel a bit sick. Sick of the constant failure. But wait, this Friday was the party. That would be my last opportunity to make friends and talk to Carter. I'd never been to a party before, mainly because no one had ever invited me to one. Pretty sure they thought my grumpy look would kill the mood. So I spent ages deliberating on an outfit, opting for a bright-colored dress to make me look more cheerful. As I walked into the party, I couldn't stop shaking. Everyone looked like they were having a great time, while I just looked like a grumpy kid longing for their mama. It's okay, Isabel. Keep calm, I told myself. I just needed a couple drinks to boost my confidence. So, I got a couple of shots from the bar, and wow, I immediately felt like a whole new person. I was about to bravely talk to some girls when suddenly a guy came over to me and said, Hey, looks like you're having a bad time. If you don't like these things, I think you should just go home. It's okay. Great. If even alcohol couldn't help me, then what else could? I lost all interest in making friends, so I decided to take the random guy's advice and leave. Everyone would have far more fun without having to see my moody face anyway. As I hurried out of there, I heard someone shout, Isabel, wait up! I turned around and saw that it was Carter. He caught up with me and asked why I was leaving so early. I muttered out how partying wasn't really my thing and I'd rather hang out somewhere else. Yeah, I'm not so keen on them either. Can I come with you? I froze for a minute, but I guess he presumed I was angry with him, as he apologized and went to leave. Oh, hell no. No way am I gonna let him slip away again, so I said quickly, Of course you can come! But it came out as loud screaming. The poor guy must have felt like a tiger was growling in front of his face. Well, at least he was still coming with me, right? Even if it was out of fear. He looked a little unsure as I led him toward one of my favorite places, which was underneath this bridge, but when he saw all of the awesome graffiti, he seemed to be more at ease. He had fun, looking from one piece to the next. Then we started talking, and turns out we could get on pretty well. We soon became close friends, and I even introduced him to Jocelyn. The more I spent time with Carter, the more I liked him, and I started to think that he liked me too. Don't ask me why. It's just a gut feeling. Then one day I opened the door to see Carter standing there with his huge bouquet and a cute gift box. Oh, sweet Lord, were they for me? I knew I needed to say something, so I mumbled out, Who is that for? Ouch. Did that sound a bit harsh? Should I ask again? And maybe with a softer voice and a smile. But before I could say anything, Carter replied, Oh, these are for Jocelyn. Can you please give them to her? Thanks. He handed me them, then ran off. What? Carter was in love with Jocelyn? But hey, it's no shocker that good things never happen to me, and someone with a naturally joyful look like her would get all the guys. Let's face it, who wants a mean-looking girlfriend? This sucked. After that, I purposefully avoided Carter, and we didn't talk at all for a week. It was all too much. So one day after lectures, I went to my happy place under the bridge. What? There was this new graffiti drawing. It was huge, ugly, and I think it was for me. As in dried, dripping letters, it said, I love you, Isabel. I stared at it open-mouthed. Was this someone's idea of a joke? Then someone came up alongside me. It was Carter. It's not my finest work, but I tried, he said coyly. Huh? He did this, but why? Then he continued, The flowers and gift were for you, but I thought you were annoyed, so I freaked out and said they were for Jocelyn. So afterward, I called her and told her the truth, and she said that you like me too. Now that explains the weird looks Jocelyn has been giving me. I was so having words with her later. I drew that a week ago. I've been following you every day after college. Not in a creepy way. I just wanted to be here when you first saw it. And oh man, it was so worth it. Then he gave me the cutest smile and pulled me in for a hug. Oh, wow. This guy knew how to make a girl melt. And you know what? I was smiling, and I wasn't forcing it. So that's it. We became an official couple. Turns out he doesn't care if I have a RBF or not, as he took the time out to discover the real me. You should never judge a book by its cover, as you might miss out on the best adventure ever. So, if that girl or guy looks a bit miserable, then maybe you shouldn't rule them out as being arrogant and moody, and instead, give them a chance.